Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are here to do my June wrap-up. Alright, cool. So I actually listened to quite a few audiobooks in June. I think I've just been feeling a bit like it was getting to the end of the school term and I was just feeling a bit burnt out, and so I wasn't feeling up to doing very much, and I think that's part of the reason I was listening to audiobooks. So the first thing that I listened to in June was Across the Greengrass Fields, which is the 6th book in the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. But this is a fantasy series following a bunch of children who kind of go through doors into different worlds. And this one in particular follows a child who goes into a world which is very horse focused. It's full of like horse type creatures like centaurs and unicorns, and the character has some personal identity struggles with being intersex. So this is a series that's beautiful in its diversity. I always enjoy listening to these. I didn't love this one as much as I have previous ones, especially since I was never a horse girl. I've never gone through a horse phase. As much as now I'm kind of into unicorns, was never a horse girl, so I didn't get that level of excitement from that perspective. But yeah, it was still just an enjoyable thing to listen to, and yeah, but I just felt kind of average about it overall though, where there's other ones in the series that I have adored. Okay. I then listened to Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. Planet Barbarians has been all over BookTok recently, particularly, and also someone was talking about it in one of Ali's streams, and then I saw that it was on Scribd, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try it out. And it's a smutty alien book. That's all it really is. Really quite well done for what it is. Outside of the very beginning I have problems with, because quite early on in the book there is an instance of assault against a woman, and then a little while after that there is a scene between the romantic pair that lacks consent, which with the context of it might have been able to overlook with everything else going on, but the fact that the book started with that just made it all the more uncomfortable, and I don't think it needed to exist there. I'm kind of at a point where I just don't want to see sexual assault in books. They're very rare that it actually feels necessary. In most instances, just regular violence, I think, would achieve more or less the same thing, and I just don't like seeing it. And yeah, with the questionable consent mixed in, that was awful. Once we got over that, the rest of the book was just... It actually had a story going on along with the smut, so there was that, but yeah, a blue-horned alien guy. Personally not that into like the barbarian archetype, but I might listen to more, I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, just that the beginning was uncomfortable, but otherwise it was pretty good for what it was if you want a smutty alien book. Then I read The Modern Witch's Guide to Magical Self-Care by Tanane Stewart. This is a witchy self-care book. As much as pretty much all witchcraft books are a bit woo-woo, this was more woo-woo than any other witchy self-care books I've read before, which isn't really the side I necessarily go down, but just in terms of the fact of, also because a lot of the direction it went into was completely irrelevant to me, in that so much of it was tied up in like astrology and the seasons. As someone in the southern hemisphere, like everything's completely opposite for me, so yeah, I don't know, it was a relaxing enough thing to read. I don't know, it was there, and so I read it. Then I listened to another smutty book, but this time the like smutty Disney reimaginings, because there's a series by Katie Robert where it's taking characters from Disney movies, but they're put in this kind of modern setting and they're real smutty. So I listened to Learn My Lesson, which is a relationship between Hades, Meg, and Hercules. I'm interested enough that I might listen to others, but I will say that I kind of hated Hades in this. And the narrator for Hades did not help that, because the narrator for Hades had this really serious monotone, and I don't gel with people who are too serious, you know? Like, there's a time and a place for being serious, but overall, like, I'm not someone who takes myself very seriously, and I get along with people who have a bit of humor in their day-to-day, right? So, not my type of person, and I can't... but I didn't hate listening to it outside of his character. Although the other thing that bothers me is that like Hades, in terms of Disney, Hades is one of my favorite Disney villains, and it just like completely ripped away everything I like about the actual Disney Hades. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I always love kind of retellings type of things. It's interesting to see what people do with different characters. But yeah, I just didn't like Hades. But I can't even talk about these books without laughing, because they're plot. Well, they're smart with a side of plot. Yes. All right, moving away from that, I listened to The Graces by Laura Eve, which is a YA fantasy about a girl who is kind of obsessed with the Graces, who are this family at her school that are kind of, everyone kind of looks at a little bit in a similar way to the Cullens in Twilight. And I did see a lot of reviews saying this was like Twilight but bad or something along those lines, but I actually like this more than Twilight. But yeah, she's really interested in this family, and there's this aura around them where people think that they're witches, and then she starts becoming friends with them and stuff happens. And I don't know, I did really enjoy this book. Not likable characters necessarily, but I don't think a book has to contain likable characters. And also I kind of guessed what was going on the whole time, because there's a thing at the end that comes up and I'm like, yeah, I kind of suspected that was the case the whole time. But it was interesting in terms of, like, there's always that hint of magic in the background because they're suspected witches, but at the same time, like, you don't really know whether magic's really at play or not, or whether it's just, you know, kind of teenagers being interested in all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I did find this really interesting, and also it was just, I have a hard time sometimes with audiobooks listening to American narrators a lot of the time, soz friends, but this had a British narrator, so much easier to listen to for me too. Yeah, this has a lot of 1-star reviews on Goodreads, but I really enjoyed it, and it was an interesting exploration and piecing together exactly what was going on, and, you know, exploration of friendship and feeling like something's wrong with you and all this kind of stuff. So I did find it interesting, and I always love things that have that kind of witchy element. So this month I also read Tender Morsels by Margot Lanigan, which is a book that was lent to me by, well, the school librarian who I'm friendly with, when I said that I liked fairy tales. So I knew this must have something to do with fairy tales, and indeed it is kind of a retelling of Red Rose and Snow White. But there's a lot more than that going on. This is not a book that anyone and everyone can or should read. I would not just stumble into it completely blindly, because it contains incest, sexual assault, and bestiality. It's a pretty dark book. It's a pretty dark and twisted book. And yeah, I didn't necessarily know what I was walking into, but it starts right off the bat there with that stuff. But yeah, I love fairy tale retellings and seeing again what people have done with different stories and different characters. So it was really interesting from that perspective, and it was beautifully written, and there was some interesting stuff going on, but it was just a lot. It was just a lot. And as I just said, like, the assault stuff is stuff I'm kind of sick of reading in general, because like I have to deal with it enough in real life. Like, do I want it in my fiction? So this was a lot, and I kind of don't know how I feel at this point. I don't regret reading it, and it was interesting and beautifully written, but very dark and just a lot to process. A lot to process. Yes. I finished it now though, so I will be returning that. I feel like I read something else. And then the last book that I read in June was a book that has been getting a lot of buzz, and that is Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Liamede. Should really probably have looked up how to pronounce that. My apologies. But this, yeah, everyone's been talking about this. It just released recently. It is a YA thriller, dark academia, because it is set at this fancy school that has only 2 black students going to the school, and they're suddenly being kind of harassed and having all their secrets revealed by this anonymous texter in a way that gives the overall book at the beginning very much Gossip Girl vibes, but more sinister. And so you're kind of trying to work out what's going on, why they're being targeted, blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of the general stuff of what's going on. And this book is also queer, both with an established gay character and with someone who's kind of realizes their sexuality along the way. So that's also a lovely element, and I did really enjoy this. So the buzz it's getting, it's well deserved. Yeah, it was really interesting, and I consumed this in like, well, I started it one night and then finished it the next morning because I was consumed in wanting to know exactly what was happening. It wasn't, sometimes with these kind of books I feel very unsatisfied by the end, but as much as things got wrapped up kind of quickly, I didn't necessarily feel that way for this book, so I did think it was pretty good. I did think it was pretty good. I mean, even from the very beginning, I was intrigued as someone who was always very into Gossip Girl, sadly. And yeah, it also has some things to provoke a bit of deeper thought and stuff as well, so yeah, I did really enjoy that one. I don't feel like I've really watched any TV. Of course, watched more Critical Role. I think we have watched a few movies though. Where are my movies? I haven't added. I just realised I haven't actually logged everything in Letterboxd. I'm gonna have to try and remember what else we watched. So the first thing we watched in June was It Chapter 2, because we finished the Marvel Cinematic Universe pretty much, so we're moving on to other things. And because we watched it for my birthday the month before, we watched It Chapter 2, which I do not love as much as the first movie, but it is still a fun enough ride, although a bit of a long movie, I'll admit, but I do still enjoy it. So that's what we watched. Nice horror movie that I would recommend watching the movies over reading the book, to be honest. That is one of those rare instances. Then we watched Army of the Dead, which is a zombie movie where this group basically goes on a heist. So they have to like get through all of the zombies to try and get somewhere to open a safe and get all the money out and everything. It was a fun enough movie, nothing like super amazing. Fun enough, even though it's one of those type of movies that almost feels a bit pointless by the end, because it's one of those movies where like everyone dies. Yeah, it was a fun enough ride, cool looking scenes and stuff. Also interesting in that it's one of the only pieces of media that I've seen that really humanizes the zombies in a way, in terms of them not just all being completely mindless creatures, but some of them had like obvious emotions and connections to each other. So that was a small element, but something I found interesting. I watched Blythe Spirit, which was not a great movie, to be completely honest. It's apparently a remake of a much older movie, but it follows and a medium communes with a ghost, and then this guy ends up being basically haunted by his ex-wife, who is dead. I don't know, it was an okay thing to watch. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's awful either. I don't know. But the movie we watched last week was Willys Wonderland, which is a new movie featuring Nicolas Cage, which is basically kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, because he gets locked in this children's restaurant with these animatronics that try and kill everyone. It's not a good movie. It's not a good movie. But it is the type of movie that you should get a group of friends together, maybe a few drinks, and just watch it and enjoy the chaos. Also, interestingly, I mean, slight spoilers for the main character, I guess, but it's pretty obvious from the beginning, just interesting, that Nicolas Cage in this movie does not speak a single word. Not a single word. I want to know that character's backstory, but he does not speak a single word. And it's basically just a movie of Nicolas Cage beating the crap out of a bunch of creepy animatronics. One of those movies that's technically bad, or just silly, but I would watch it again because it's ridiculous. And then the movie we watched on Monday, I was only partially paying attention to because it was Nathan's pick and it was like an action movie that I wasn't interested in. I don't even know what it was calling. Something Angels Falling or something about like Secret Service guy. Someone tries to kill the president and I don't know. That's some of the movie we watched. I didn't really care for. But yeah, that's pretty much all the media that I consumed in June, outside of video games, of course, because let's be honest, that's what I've been spending most of my free time doing, either watching stuff with Nathan or playing video games, because when the brain is exhausted, you just want to have some mindless fun, and that's often Dead by Daylight, so. But yeah, I guess that's gonna be all from me today. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them, or let me know what your favorite thing that you read in June was, and otherwise, I'll see you next time. TTFN and Starzy out.